Hi there, my name is Allison Fay, and I'm going to be spending a little bit of time right now with some students in second to fifth grade talking about friendships during COVID. And so this is a chance for parents to watch this with kids, if that makes sense, or maybe a teacher to assign this to a class. It does come with a worksheet that's optional that you can do to think about some of the big feelings that are happening. And hopefully this will just be a chance to think about take a pause and think about everything that's happening and think of some tools that we can use as we move forward and work on our friendship skills, even while all of COVID is happening around us. So thanks for being here. I know you all are on screens quite a bit as we're trying to make good choices to help keep other people safe. And it can be hard and it can be exhausting. But hopefully there will be some tips and tools that you can use here in our short time together as you think about being a friend during COVID-19. So I just want to start by saying that there's power in connection. So much of what we've been talking about and hearing is the idea of distancing, which is true with our bodies, physical distancing, and in our homes and creating that space. But just because our bodies are staying physically apart doesn't mean that we don't have that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look for opportunities of ways to stay connected. With technology and with, we'll talk about a lot of different ways to be creative here. We can still find ways to stay connected and to grow in this time where we're learning a lot about distance. We can also learn a lot about connection. And I wanted to start, I've heard that someone explain this, like what was happening with COVID-19 to her kids in this way. And I wish I knew exactly who it was so I could credit them. So if you know this, where this comes from, please let me know. It's one of those things that you hear and so you pass on verbally. So I don't know exactly where it came from, but to me it made a lot of sense. When we're thinking about what's currently happening in America with COVID-19, it's kind of like when you're in a pool in a hot summer day and the lifeguards blow the whistle because they're worried that somebody is in trouble in the pool. When the lifeguards all blow their whistles, everybody clears the pool. It doesn't matter how great of a swimmer you are. It doesn't matter who you're at the pool with that day. It doesn't matter the tools that you have. We all clear the way so the lifeguard can focus on the person who's having a hard time, who's struggling, and who is in danger. And the friend was explaining to her child that right now what's happening is we're all just trying to get out of the pool so that the lifeguards, the people who are our doctors and our nurses and our frontline responders and all these folks can focus on the people who are drowning and who are having, who are physically sick. And we can get out of the pool, we can get out of the way so that they can just do that focusing and so it doesn't spread to other people. And so when we think about that, it's really about as a community saying, I care about you and I care about you and I care about you. And so I'm going to get out of the way so that the people, the helpers can do the helping and we can create our own space temporarily, which the temporarily I know has gone on for a long time, while people are working on those that need the most help. And so right now what we're kind of doing is getting out of the pool, but even when we're out of the pool, there are opportunities to grow in our skills and to grow as being good friends. I want to acknowledge that this is hard. I have never lived through a pandemic before. I'm figuring out as I go. I'm spending a lot of time reading and listening. And sometimes when you're a kid, things get talked over your head or under your head, or you either feel like people are leaving you out of things or explaining things way too simply for you. It's hard for parents to try to give kids just enough information they need so they can make choices that feel like that they're smart and not scared, but not enough where we're up at night worrying about this. And so I want to just say that this is hard and this is hard stuff, and the fact that you are trying and the fact that you are trying to stay connected is just so good in a time where things are so hard. If we just say, oh, this is easy, this is a pandemic, everyone's said this before, then the feelings that you're having feel like that they're not real. So I want to acknowledge if you're having big feelings right now, there's a reason for that and that's okay. It's okay to be upset and overwhelmed about all the changes that are happening. If you had something you were really looking forward to and it didn't happen, if you were really looking forward to an event or something during the year, or seeing a certain person, it's okay to be upset when that happens. People of all ages are upset as things are changing and we're trying to do what's safest, and it's hard. It's hard to make sacrifices and it's hard to have things that we love removed from us for a while. That's hard, especially if it's something you're passionate about, you love doing and you're not able to do right now. This is hard stuff. And we can't change our feelings about how hard this is, but it helps when we can put a name on the feeling and choose what we're going to do with them. I'm really frustrated right now, and so I'm going to go write in my journal. I'm really angry right now, so I'm going to go on a run around the block. I'm really lonely right now, so I'm going to listen to my favorite music. You know, to figure out, sometimes when we name a feeling, we can figure out this is how I'm feeling. It makes the bigness that's around us, we can name it, it makes it feel like, okay, that's the name, and then we can figure out what we're going to do with that energy. And so I just want to start by saying this is hard, and I'm sorry that it's hard. My friend Sue made this painting for me. It's a man named Ben Platt won an award for acting. And when he won his award for acting, one of the things that he said in his acceptance speech is the things that make you strange are the things that make you powerful. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that. And I think that sometimes the way that different people approach hard things can be very different. Even in the same family, you can have one sibling who is feeling one way about something, someone else feeling a completely different way about the same thing. We all come to these, what's happening with our own feelings, with our own background, with our own experiences, and we can all handle it in different ways. And so sometimes if you're feeling like, oh, something's wrong with me that I'm handling it this way, sometimes just the things that make us different and the things of how we see the world, that could be our superpower. And so if you're thinking, you know what, I'm the only one who's taking my feelings and drawing them, or I'm the only one who's writing music, or I'm the only one who's using these feelings to try to move faster than I've moved before, whatever it is that you're doing with as you're working to try to sort of process all that's happening, if as long as these are things that you're doing that don't hurt other people and don't hurt yourself, those are things that make sense for your body. And to pay attention and listen to your body, because what you might think is a strange way of handling this might be the right way for your body to handle this. And so I would challenge you to think about ways that we can turn out instead of turn in. When a pandemic is happening or when any tragedy is happening, what they've found is that when we can care about other people, that's one of the best ways to fight the feeling of being isolated, which is another word for lonely. It's a more intense word for lonely. And so when we're feeling like, oh, we have no one to talk to, we have no one to do, we're thinking about how can I help? What can I do to bring joy to other people? What can I do to make the world better? That sometimes gets us out of that bubble of feeling lonely and into a bigger space of seeing the world as with opportunities to create joy. And we have to be creative because we want to make sure that we're still keeping our space away from other people and being respectful of boundaries and all those kinds of things. But there are a lot of different ideas, and those will come up soon, of ways to turn out. And so I would have you think about, instead of turning inside, think of ways right now where you could be turning outside. And so we think about, okay, we're turning outside and we are working on our skills about being friends during COVID. Yes, a lot of things are on pause right now, but our growing is never on pause. And we become friends and we become better friends as we practice. We aren't all born as people who are really good at being friends. It's something that we learn, that other people show us how to do through friendships, and show us how to treat other people by the way that they treat us, or the way that we say, oh, we don't want to do that, we want to do our own thing. So when it comes to building our own skills, we can practice our listening, we can practice our kindness, and we can do that with the people who live in the same home with us, which can be even more challenging sometimes than our friends. We sometimes are kinder and better listeners to our friends than to our caregivers or to our siblings. But thinking about a chance to pay attention to, what does active listening look like in our bodies? Right now, move your body like you're doing active listening. Did your eyes change? Like, did you look at the screen a different way when you're being an active listener? Did your, sometimes the way that we just point our body towards the speaker change a little bit. Sometimes our feet go on the floor. Whatever we have in our hands, we drop. When we want a friend to know that we're really listening to them, it's about dropping distractions and paying attention. And so taking opportunities to do that. Connecting in new ways. A lot of you are doing distance learning with screens, and so that's a very challenging way to connect. But there are also opportunities that maybe If you're in a big classroom, you might not feel comfortable raising your hand in the same way that you feel comfortable typing in an answer in the chat bar. Or maybe that there are ways that you have found that you could reach out to, if you're really struggling, like the school counselor or the school nurse, and asking your teacher, can you get me connected with the school nurse, the school counselor, because I really need some help in unpacking some of these feelings. Finding new ways to connect. Making connections with old friends. Maybe you have a friend you haven't seen in 5 years because they moved away, or you haven't seen since the summer because you saw them at camp. And with the school year and seeing everybody, we sometimes can forget old friends and people we've connected with in the past. But when you're on your own, you can think back to some of those friendships and think, you know what? I bet I'm going to send that person a message. I'm going to check in with that person and see how that person is doing. And maybe that person's a relative that you haven't seen in a while. But thinking about old friends and ways that this might be an opportunity to connect with them. Looking outside of school. So much of the people that we see during the school day when we're not in COVID times are our friends at school and our teachers at school. And so maybe we'll meet someone in the neighborhood who goes to a different school because they're a little bit older, a little bit younger, or just go to a different school. And there's someone who, they can stay in their yard and we can stay in our yard and we can, chat and set up a lawn chair and talk or whatever it might be, thinking about who might be new people that we will have the chance to know who are not in our school. And again, that can sometimes be family. Being creative, making art and performing for others. Mr. Rogers, who had his own TV show, I heard that he was really sick when he was a kid. And so he did a lot of puppetry and things like that while he was working on getting healthy. And then that became his career. And we think about, are there things that I could create, a song that I could write, a puppet show that I could do and ask my parent to film and send it to my little cousins who live in another state who would love a chance to watch a puppet show because they might be bored. Maybe it is creating a mural with paper to hang. Maybe it is doing sidewalk chalk outside, thinking of ways to, the arts bring us all together so much. And so thinking about ways to use art to connect. Laughter. Laughter is good for us, and it's hard when everything feels so heavy to sometimes find reasons to laugh. But when we do, our body has a release. And so maybe that is, watching a comedy movie with your family one night. Maybe it is even just reading a Laffy Taffy joke out loud, whatever. And maybe it's passing on something that you heard that was funny, but just that idea of, even though things can feel heavy right now, there's laughter even in heavy times, and to hold on to that laughter and make sure that we have opportunities to share joy. And then just thinking bigger. This might be a time where you connect with your pet more than you've ever have as you're taking on more responsibility for feeding and walking. Maybe it is that you're getting to hang out with a sibling who you normally don't see because your friend groups are so different. Maybe it is meeting people in your neighborhood who you otherwise wouldn't know, or if you're someone who likes to be creative, creating art and dropping it off at homes of people, as a way of spreading joy. So even though we're on pause, we can still be building. And one thing that I'd suggest thinking about, because when you're having a big feeling, it's hard to think of what to do. So before there's big feelings happening, make activity lists. What if I'm feeling angry? What are 10 things that I could do with that energy? And I would suggest that none of the 10 involve technology, because people make most of their mistakes on technology when they are angry. So take a minute and see, can you think of 2 to just start with? Maybe it is, I've had kids say, punching my pillow when I'm angry. Some people like to write in a journal when they're angry. Some people like to call a friend and talk out loud about what just happened. But make a list of 10 things that you can feel do when you're angry with that energy. Make a list of 10 things you can do when you're sad, 10 things you can do when you're lonely. So when you're feeling these feelings, you don't have to sit there in that moment and think, what should I do with this? You can go to your activity lists and say, oh, I wrote down that when I was feeling really angry, the way that I feel better is shooting baskets outside the basketball hoop. I'm going to go out and do that for a while. It's sort of like your cheat sheets of what are things that you can do when you're feeling stuck. And if you have a new feeling that you don't know what to do, you can page through some of your lists and see if one of those activities seems to match with your feelings. And books, taking time away from screens and reading books. We know that when we read fiction, it helps us become better people and better friends because we can imagine what other people are going through. I was working with really young kids at a school once. They were like in first grade, and I asked them. I said, "Why do you think it is that kids who read a lot tend to be kinder and better friends?" And a lot of kids had a lot of different answers. You can think now what you might have said. One boy raised his hand. He said, "Well, I don't want to be the bad guy in someone else's story." I thought that was really wise. That when we read books, it reminds us, I don't want to be the bad guy in someone else's story. And so I want to imagine what they're going through, how they're seeing the world, and how I might be someone who helps instead of hurts. And when we read, we can imagine how the book characters are facing their hardships and what we might do. We can read what characters have taught you about being a good friend. And right now, if we were in the same room together, that'd be a question I'd love to talk to you all about. When you read, what characters have taught you about being a good friend? One of the ones for me, Hermione in the Harry Potter books, I found it so powerful when she stood up against her friends and said, this isn't the right thing to do, even though it's really hard. And she was rewarded for doing that. And they still remained really good friends. And I mean, those kinds of things that we see other people do, it inspires us to be better people and to be better friends. So giving our eyes a break from screens and really just diving into books and learning what other people do when they're facing hard times and what they do when they're trying to be better friends. And I want you to know that the choices that you make do have a positive ripple effect. You might think, oh, I'm just one person. Every one person who's making healthy choices of, washing their hands and wearing a mask and keeping their distance and doing what we're advised to do to help keep people safe, that is a positive ripple effect. And you're setting an example for other people as well as you're making choices that help keep people safe. And so just know if you're feeling like, oh, I'm just one person, sometimes that one person making a safer choice inspires someone else to do that as well. When you say to someone outside, yeah, I would love to have you come into the house right now and watch a movie, but we can't because we want to keep germs apart. But let's both watch the same movie tonight, and then let's talk about it outside tomorrow. And creating those examples as we so much of choices people make is leading by example. So know the example that you're setting is powerful and does have a positive ripple effect. And then I would ask you to think about who are the 5 people that you can talk to if you need to talk to a grown-up. And if you think of yourself as walking through the day and something happens that gives you a feeling that you're like, oh, this is so much right now, who are the 5 grown-ups that you can talk to if you have a problem? We say 5 because sometimes the first person you'd go to is in the middle of something and they're not the best person in that moment to help. Sometimes someone on your net has forgotten rules about safety or has forgotten ways to be kind, and they might come across as being really rushed or brash because they're going through something. We say 5 because sometimes the first person you talk to isn't the best person to help. And sometimes the person on the net is the person who's causing the problem. And so we say 5 so that you have a lot of people to pick from and you never feel stuck or by yourself. And so think about who those 5 adults could be. If you're struggling with something and you tell a parent and they say, oh, I can't do this right now, but they might say, you know what, your aunt is on your safety net. Why don't you FaceTime your aunt? Let me see if she's around right now so you two can talk about what's going on and you have an adult to help you unpack what's happening. Maybe it is the school counselor. Maybe it is the school nurse. Maybe it's your best friend's mom. Maybe it is a mentor in your faith community. But thinking who are the 5 people that form your net and reaching out when you need help. And one thing you might want to do is just trace your hand and draw or write the names of the 5 people on your hands to remind yourselves that there are so many people out there who do want you to grow up healthy and safe and strong and do want to be there for you in this hard time. And so think about who those 5 people might be. And if you're struggling thinking of one, think about, okay, who might be relatives, who might be people in my school, even if I don't see them, I could still reach out. Who are people who are friends, parents who might be able to be helpful? Who are people that may have led me in an activity, like a coach or something like that? And then the thing we want to pay attention to is when we have our safety net, we want to pay attention if anyone ever tries to separate us from our net. If someone says stuff like, well, let's keep this secret, let's not tell anyone but us, this is just for you and me. That's not how a net works. A net, healthy people who are part of your net want to be one of many. People who don't know the safety rules want to separate you from your net. And so if someone online or in person is trying to separate you from your net and trying to get you to keep secrets and do things by yourselves, and it makes you feel, often gives that like uh-oh feeling, check in with someone else on your net, because we want to make sure that you're surrounded by people who know the rules and want to help keep you safe. Just one thing I want to mention as we're thinking about being a friend during the time of COVID is sometimes kids who are the best at active listening, are the best at remembering to connect, and are really, really skilled at getting people to talk about what's going on with them, can get a lot of stuff dumped on them. People who are a helper can have a lot of people saying, and this is happening, and this is happening. And if you think about problems like a backpack, we can only carry so much in our backpack before it's overflowing. And so think about that backpack, and if it is overflowing, if too many people are talking to you about things, or if there's things that are just too big that are past what you know about, or just seem dangerous, you're allowed to ask for help. Talking is very different than tattling. What do you think the difference is between telling and tattling? I was in one school and a kid said, well, I don't know the words, but I know the sound effects. Tattling sounds like this, and telling sounds like this. So it's like tattling, we hear our voice change. We hear that just like, I want to watch you get in trouble, that feeling. Telling is when we're saying something because we want to help. And so if hurting is happening, if someone's hurting you, hurting someone else, they're worried that hurting might happen, you're allowed to ask for help and you're encouraged to ask for help. You don't have to take all the problems of the world in your backpack. Adults, we are encouraged to ask for help and we have too much in our backpack. And so you as a kid get to ask for help in the same way. And we learn about being good friends through practice. And some of the practices are hard because we have two choices of an easy thing or a hard thing. The hard thing is usually the right thing. Isn't that unfair? It's like the right choice is usually the hard choice. And so we practice and we learn that sometimes digging in and doing the hard choices are what's helpful as we build our skills as being good friends. So apologies when we screw up, saying that we've screwed up. Understanding how someone else might be feeling. Again, when we read books, imagining what someone else is feeling, thinking of kids in our classroom, thinking of kids in the neighborhood, how might they be feeling? Naming our own feelings. When we can name our feelings, they can feel more like we have a sense of what's happening than when we can't name what's happening. Expecting respect. You deserve to be treated well. You deserve to be treated with respect. If someone is doing something that hurts you and makes you feel unsafe, or is doing something that's against safety rules, you're allowed to ask for help. You're allowed to say no to grown-ups and other kids who make you feel scared or unsafe. You're allowed to ask for help from other people if that happens. And you're allowed to, and then we learn about cooperating, give and take. If we always want our way all the time, that makes it hard to be a good friend. But saying something like, especially cooperating with siblings, that's really hard right now, but like, oh, I know that the show you really want to watch is at 7, so you can have the remote tonight, but I want the remote tomorrow night at 7 because the show I want to watch is on, you know? And having some of those pieces of expecting respect and learning that cooperation. It's hard, but it's really worth it as we think about how we're growing in our skills. And just, there'll be new challenges that pop up that we weren't ready for, that we weren't planning for. And we think about, okay, who are the 5 grown-ups in my life who I can talk to about this new challenge? What are the feelings that I'm feeling right now? And what can I do with those feelings? And how can I turn out to show that I'm caring about other people instead of getting stuck inside? Now, it's okay to go inside to recharge. A lot of people need time alone and need time by themselves to recharge. That's absolutely fine. But thinking about, now that I've recharged, how can I use some of my energy to create joy for other people. We're entering a season of joy. We think about all the things that happen in December and all the different holidays and different ways that people share joy. And so there might be new positive challenges that we can look at and say, this is a way I'm going to spread some joy in my neighborhood. Last thing I'll say, I work for a place called Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. We're named after Jacob Wetterling. He went missing when he was in 6th grade, and we looked for him for a very, very, very long time. And sadly, when we found out what happened, we found out that he had died. And if you've ever had someone in your life who you love die, you know that there's a lot of feelings that happen when you're dealing with the death. And so if that's something you've experienced, you know that it feels sometimes like a roller coaster, or it can feel like you're, in water with a lot of waves coming over you. There are a lot of different feelings that happen when you're processing something that's hard, like a death. If you've ever had someone who you love die, or an animal that you love die, that's something, those are really big feelings, and it's probably given you some practice in how to name and handle big feelings. And so when Jacob died, his family and friends said, you know what? We want to have, when people think of Jacob, to think of the wonderful person that he was. He was a great kid. He loved soccer. He did theater. He played in the band, trombone. He wasn't just every kid is different. Every kid is special. Every kid is unique. And we wanted, when you hear the word legacy, a legacy is sort of when people think of your name, what they think about. We wanted Jacob's legacy to be a positive ripple effect. I was talking about before, leaving a positive ripple effect. What is his legacy? And so we wrote 11 things that Jacob was. He wore an 11 for his soccer number. And we asked people, we said, if you want to help us live out Jacob's legacy, think of ways to live by these 11 traits. And this is a great challenge now in this hard time to think about, how can I, when I look back on this in 10 years or 20 years, or when I'm, a grandparent and I'm telling my grandchildren about this one year that was, that happened, that we all sort of had to stay in our homes. What is our legacy going to be for that year? Are we going to talk about times that we were a good friend? Are we going to be able to talk about times that we were kind with other people? Are we going to talk about times that we were positive? And thinking about those 11, thinking about ways that we can leave a legacy as we make choices today that can help keep people safe tomorrow and can help spread some positivity and some joy. You see, number 8 is being joyful. Number 11 is being positive. And I often, when I'm in schools, I'll ask kids to pick one of the 11 and think about how they might work on building that skill. If you're someone who plays sports, if you're really good at offense, you want to work on your defense. If you're really good, if you're a really good sprinter, you may want to work more on your long game, and so thinking about that balance. If you're really good at being a good friend, maybe this is a time to work on being thankful. If you're really good at being gentle with other people, maybe this is a time to build up your fairness. And so thinking about that list and thinking about how we can all work to create a legacy for when we think of these times. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today to think about this stuff. I know that a lot of you are probably really done with staring in front of a screen and having people talk at you. I wish that we had a chance to talk together, and I miss being with you all in the schools and having these chats. But hopefully this gave you a chance to think about some new things and maybe refresh some things you haven't thought about for a while. This is information about where I work and the trainings that we do, and we have trainings online for parents and professionals as well as for kids. We're always thankful when we talk about being joyful, and we talk about being thankful when people do have resources of time or talents. If they're willing to give them to a nonprofit like ours, that makes our ability to share messages of joy much easier. And so we just always want to thank people for believing in us and believing in this mission. And then I want to put our crisis line up there as well. If you're in crisis, or if your family is in crisis and you need to reach out to somebody, we can be reached at 1-800-325-HOPE. And thank you so much for taking time to think about being a good friend. And thank you so much for all that you're doing to create a positive ripple effect. Thank you.